Right now, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer is cutting through the 85-degree Fahrenheit waters of the Persian Gulf. It is a standard night patrol, until the Combat Information Center lights up. A single crimson blip appears on the radar screen, moving at Mach 10, traveling over 3 miles per second. This is not a drill. This is not a war game simulation buried deep inside the Pentagon. This is a real-time flashpoint. An inbound hypersonic anti-ship missile has just achieved a hard lock on a U.S. warship. The Aegis combat system has exactly 14 seconds to intercept a threat it was never mathematically designed to stop. 14 seconds before over 300 American sailors are incinerated in a blast furnace of burning jet fuel and melting steel. If that hull is breached, the shockwave will not stop at the waterline. It will tear straight through the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz will slam shut within the hour. Trillions of dollars will evaporate from 401k retirement accounts before Wall Street even opens for trading. The mainstream media is completely blind to this accelerating catastrophe. They are burying the real headlines while the high-stakes table is being set for World War III. But behind closed doors in Washington, panic is hemorrhaging through the intelligence community. Because the weapon screaming toward our boys in the Gulf right now was not engineered in Tehran. It was forged in Beijing. And the men sitting inside the mobile launch vehicle have absolutely no idea what they are doing. Are you prepared for what happens when the Aegis shield shatters? The hull fractures, the ocean boils, and Washington scrambles to cover up how a rogue regional militia acquired a hypersonic carrier killer capable of evading our multi-billion-dollar defense networks. This is the intelligence failure of the century, and the mainstream media is deliberately looking the other way. They are broadcasting political theater, while classified satellite surveillance tells a terrifying and undeniable story. High-resolution optics from low Earth orbit captured a massive logistical operation at the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas just 48 hours ago. 3 colossal cargo vessels flying the flag of the People's Republic of China docked under the cover of a localized electrical blackout. Their shipping manifests claimed they were delivering agricultural equipment and civilian machinery, but the heavy lift cranes were not moving grain. They were offloading reinforced steel canisters weighing over 25,000 pounds each. The intelligence community knows exactly what those crates hold. Inside those specialized environmental containers lies the YJ-21, the Eagle Strike, a state-of-the-art hypersonic anti-ship ballistic missile, engineered specifically by the PLA to vaporize American steel. The Pentagon has been tracking this illicit shadow transfer for weeks. Beijing is actively amputating our naval supremacy by proxy. They are handing a highly volatile wildcard directly to the IRGC. The political elite in our capital are absolutely terrified to admit that we are being outmaneuvered at the high-stakes table. They are terrified to tell the American taxpayer that the billions we spent on naval defense shields are now mathematically obsolete. They are terrified to tell you that American sailors are now operating inside a 1,000-mile kill box, a zone where our radar systems simply cannot track the incoming threat fast enough to deploy countermeasures. The establishment wants you blind. They want you docile. They want you completely unaware that the geopolitical tectonic plates are shifting right beneath your feet. Do not let them control your reality. Hit the subscribe button right now to join the conflict room before the algorithms silence this transmission. We are exposing the architectural blueprints of global collapse while you still have time to prepare your family. Because the foundation of this crisis was not poured yesterday. The raw hatred fueling this escalating standoff has been bleeding out for nearly 4 decades, and Beijing just handed them the ultimate spark. Are you ready to see what happens when ancient blood feuds meet next-generation ballistics? Blood turns the Persian Gulf red, literally. April 18th, 1988. Operation Praying Mantis. The U.S. Navy executed the most devastating surface naval engagement since World War II. In a matter of hours, American warships and attack aircraft amputated half of the Iranian operational fleet. We sent their heavily armed frigates and gunboats straight to the bottom of the ocean. It was a surgical strike that left a traumatic and permanent scar on the psyche of the ruling clerics in Tehran. They were utterly humiliated. They were mathematically outgunned. And for nearly 4 decades, they have been obsessively plotting their revenge. For years, the IRGC has been hemorrhaging cash into asymmetric warfare. They built thousands of cheap suicide drones. They funded proxy terrorist networks across the region. But the high command in Tehran knew the brutal truth. They knew that if they ever pushed their chips to the center of the table and went all in against a U.S. carrier strike group, their entire regime would flatline in a barrage of Tomahawk cruise missiles. The American Aegis combat system was an impenetrable fortress, a dome of overlapping radar frequencies and kinetic interceptors. Tehran possessed absolutely no weapon capable of breaking through our defensive perimeter. The American taxpayer spent trillions of dollars building that maritime wall, and today, Beijing just handed them the sledgehammer to smash it. The geopolitical tectonic plates have snapped. The intelligence community is watching in sheer horror. The PLA did not just transfer hardware. They handed a loaded revolver to a desperate regime with a 40-year vendetta. By smuggling the YJ-21 into the hands of the IRGC, China has deliberately weaponized a historical grudge. The powder keg is fully saturated in high-octane jet fuel. The establishment in Washington refuses to admit that our multi-billion-dollar maritime shield has been bypassed. We are no longer the untouchable apex predator of the high seas. We are floating aluminum targets. But here is the ultimate missing spark. The supreme leader has the weapon, but he does not have the highly trained engineers required to operate the incredibly complex targeting algorithms of Chinese hypersonic architecture. He handed the keys to a weapon moving at Mach 10 to poorly trained proxy militiamen. What exactly happens when a terrified, sleep-deprived operator sitting in a dark bunker misreads a civilian radar anomaly? He presses the launch sequence. A 22-year-old proxy militiaman, surviving on black tea and nicotine, stares blankly at a glowing targeting terminal. He does not read Mandarin. The user interface of the YJ-21 command console is entirely coded in Chinese military characters. He has been awake for 48 hours straight, sweating inside a reinforced concrete bunker buried 80 feet below the Zagros Mountains. A digital anomaly flashes across his secondary monitor. It is a commercial oil tanker, a civilian vessel projecting a massive radar cross-section. But his sleep-deprived brain, fueled by decades of anti-American indoctrination, interprets the acoustic signature as a U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. He panics. His hands shake as he punches in a sequence of targeting coordinates he barely understands. He manually overrides the localized failsafe mechanism, and he turns the firing key. Solid rocket fuel ignites with the fury of a dying star. A 25,000-pound weapon erupts from the hidden silo. It clears the atmosphere and accelerates to Mach 10 in less than 12 seconds. It generates a plasma sheath so incredibly hot that it absorbs all incoming radar waves. The tripwire has been officially crossed. The Aegis combat system aboard the American destroyer detects the thermal bloom falling from the upper atmosphere. But the mathematics of interception instantly collapse. The American radar arrays require a minimum of 40 seconds to calculate a firing solution for a standard ballistic trajectory. The Chinese hypersonic glide vehicle reaches the warship in barely 20. There is no time for the crew to brace for impact. There is no time for countermeasures. The kinetic energy of the warhead hits the deck with the force of a localized tectonic earthquake. 7,000 tons of American steel are ripped completely open. 342 U.S. sailors are instantly engulfed in a blast furnace of shrapnel and white-hot jet fuel. The ship hemorrhages heavy fuel oil and blood into the salt water. The distress signal reaches the Pentagon in less than 3 minutes. The shockwave paralyzes the Situation Room. The political elites in Washington are suddenly trapped in a geopolitical corner with no emergency exits. They cannot spin this tragedy on the Sunday morning talk shows. They cannot negotiate a ceasefire. You cannot hide the caskets of 300 American sons and daughters returning to Dover Air Force Base, draped in the stars and stripes. The regime in Tehran realizes the fatal error. They realize their proxy forces just crossed the ultimate red line. But their diplomatic apologies mean absolutely nothing to the surviving families. The damage is catastrophic and permanent. The United States must respond with overwhelming and disproportionate kinetic violence, or instantly lose its status as the apex predator of the global order. The President of the United States authorizes a surgical strike. 24 B-2 stealth bombers depart from Whiteman Air Force Base. Their payload is specifically designed to completely amputate the Iranian military infrastructure. Within 4 hours, Tehran is engulfed in a firestorm. Every single radar installation, every missile silo, and every port facility is systematically erased from the map. But the supreme leader refuses to fold his hand. He pushes his remaining chips to the absolute center of the table. The IRGC activates their final apocalyptic contingency plan. They deploy thousands of smart sea mines into the narrow shipping lanes of the Strait of Hormuz. They launch swarms of low-cost suicide drones at every single commercial vessel attempting to transit the Persian Gulf. The global energy supply chain is instantly decapitated. Over 20% of the world's daily oil consumption is violently wiped off the grid. Wall Street opens to a complete bloodbath. The Dow Jones Industrial Average flatlines. Trillions of dollars in middle-class wealth evaporate before lunchtime. But the ultimate domino has not even fallen yet. U.S. satellite intelligence detects a massive fleet of Chinese naval vessels moving aggressively into the Indian Ocean. Beijing claims they are deploying warships to protect their own oil shipments from American aggression. The Pentagon issues a direct and chilling ultimatum to the People's Liberation Army Navy. Turn your ships around or be fired upon. The United States Navy and the Chinese maritime militia are now staring directly down the barrels of each other's railguns. World War III is no longer a theoretical simulation debated by think tanks. It is a mathematical certainty. Born from a single, catastrophic human error by an untrained proxy soldier in a dark room. Washington is cornered. They must act. But how far will they push the escalation matrix? Comment A below if you believe the Pentagon will unleash a tactical nuclear strike to turn Tehran into a radioactive parking lot. Comment B if you think the United States Navy will fire the first shot at the Chinese fleet and trigger a global naval war. We need to know where you stand before the communication grids go dark. Because the fallout from this kinetic exchange will not stay in the Middle East. It is coming straight for your bank account. How fast will your life savings evaporate when the oil stops flowing? Faster than you can drive to the local gas station. First, watch the Brent crude global benchmark. The moment the news of that American warship sinking hits the wire, the high-frequency algorithmic trading bots on Wall Street will panic buy every available energy contract. The price per barrel will detonate past $150 in a matter of hours. The economic shockwave will hit your wallet before the sun even comes up. You will see $5, $6, maybe $7 a gallon at the pump by the weekend. Inflation will not just spike, it will become a terminal economic cancer eating away your family savings. Second, watch the exact coordinates of the U.S. Navy Fifth Fleet. The political regime in Washington will never publicly broadcast a retreat. They will call it a strategic repositioning on the Sunday morning news cycle. But unclassified satellite imagery will show our Nimitz-class aircraft carriers desperately pulling out of the Persian Gulf and running toward the Arabian Sea. They are fleeing from the Chinese hypersonic umbrella. The absolute second our supercarriers withdraw from that 1,000-mile kill box, the global maritime order officially flatlines. We surrender our status as the apex predator of the oceans. Third, watch the offshore Chinese yuan and the American bond market. Beijing knows exactly what the Pentagon is planning. They will not sit around and wait for the Treasury Department to freeze their assets. The Chinese Communist Party will weaponize their massive financial leverage. They will aggressively dump hundreds of billions of dollars in United States Treasury bonds onto the open market. They will deliberately crash the value of the American dollar to amputate our ability to finance a two-front global war. Your purchasing power will bleed out on the trading floor while the politicians point fingers. Fourth, watch the commercial aviation tracking grids. The exact second the FAA and international aviation authorities issue a blanket zero-altitude no-fly zone over the sovereign airspace of Iran and Iraq, the diplomatic window is permanently shattered. When those civilian passenger jets vanish from the radar screens, you will know the Tomahawk cruise missiles have already left the vertical launch tubes of our submarines. The sky will belong entirely to stealth bombers, kinetic interceptors, and supersonic warheads. You have exactly 72 hours to fortify your financial position before the global supply chains freeze completely. Because the intelligence analysts running the classified simulations inside the Pentagon already know the darkest secret of this entire crisis. The war machine cannot be turned off once the first American body is recovered from the salt water. What will the establishment do when they realize they need boots on the ground to secure the oil facilities? They will demand American blood to secure the burning oil fields of the Persian Gulf. The Pentagon will quietly prepare to draft your sons to fight a catastrophic war, triggered entirely by a sleep-deprived proxy militiaman who pressed the wrong button on a Chinese targeting console. This is exactly how the global order actually collapses. Not with a grand philosophical doctrine, not with a televised formal declaration of war. It collapses with a fatal digital glitch on a glowing monitor inside a dark bunker. The tripwire has been aggressively pulled. The hypersonic warhead is already screaming through the upper atmosphere, and the political elite in Washington are busy securing their classified underground bunkers, while your family is left completely exposed to the incoming economic shockwave. Time has run out. You are standing at ground zero of a geopolitical tectonic shift. You cannot simply scroll past this reality. The simulation is bleeding into the real world. Do you believe the United States should launch a full-scale invasion of Iran to avenge our fallen sailors? Comment yes below if you are willing to send American troops back into the Middle East. Comment no if you think we should abandon the Persian Gulf entirely and let Beijing dictate the global energy supply. You have to choose a side right now, because the men in power have already made their choice. Hit the subscribe button to join the conflict room immediately. Turn on the notification bell, because when the mainstream media blackouts inevitably begin, we will be the only transmission left broadcasting the raw intelligence. Stay vigilant. I will see you in the war room.